been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Set to come to you again from the 6th floor of 3 Financial Center in West Little Rock, Arkansas. This is the Get Ready for the Future show, brought to you by GenWealth Financial Advisors, where we help people discover, protect, and share true financial independence. That's what we do, John, for our clients every day. Welcome in, Scott Inman, co-founder John Shrewsbury, set to answer your questions again. And again, we like to start off by saying this. We are always teeing up all of these questions and answering them from the standpoint of what decisions and what considerations should people make who are asking these questions. And it's all coming from the perspective of accomplishing true financial independence.
Yeah, and it's all situational too. You've got to think about their situation. So, when we answer a question on the show, it may or may not apply to your situation,
right,
but it is something that you can at least glean some information from, make some decisions, and maybe decide to come in and talk to us about your situation, because we can help to flex that information to fit your situation.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a while now, and it always seems to be lots to consider. It is never a yes or no answer coming from these questions.
Finances are rarely black or white.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of shades of gray, a lot of it depends and things of that nature. And we've got some of that in the show today.
Yeah, and I think some of them oftentimes center around the same topics, but I'm not sure that we have addressed this particular topic as we dive in with Kurt from Little Rock. We're thinking about retiring abroad, maybe Portugal or Costa Rica. Is that financially wise, or are we missing some big risk? Kurt, thanks very much. So this is certainly a very romantic idea of retirement and can be done. Lots of people do it. Retiring overseas sounds like paradise, but is it a financial escape or a trap in disguise? So let's break it down. First thing that comes to mind here, John, for me is affordability. There has to be some research done, and he does mention 2 specific countries that they're thinking about, Portugal and Costa Rica, in terms of cost of living. How affordable is it going to be? How does your retirement income that would happen on American soil translate into a foreign land?
Yeah, and I don't know anything about Portugal, but I do know a little bit about Costa Rica. I know that Costa Rica is a destination for a ton of people that are retiring, primarily because there's a lot of Americans there, number one. And secondly, the cost of living is substantially lower in Costa Rica than it is in the United States. And so, and plus it's very tropical down there. So in thinking about that, I can't think of a better place to be.
That's right.
But that being said, I think that you do have to look at affordability. What does it cost? And I think that there is number one thing I would say before you do anything, you ought to take a long vacation there.
Yeah.
You ought to go and get a Verbo or something of that nature. Go camp out for about a month. Because I think about it economically, I think about it culturally, I think about a lot of different things. A big thing, especially as you get older, is the availability of health care. Mm-hmm. Is it the level of health care that you need personally? Is it the quality of health care that you've been accustomed to? Because, Scott, all of those things go into this big picture of being financially independent, because who cares if the cost of living is cheap if the doctors don't know what they're doing?
Right.
So that's a pretty big rock that you've got to be sure that you take care of in thinking about this.
Yeah, both of us are real beach vacation guys.
Yes.
That's our favorite place to vacation. And I've often thought, if I spend a week there, I'm on vacation. But if I ever spent a couple of weeks there, I'd have to find a church to go to. I'd have to find some way to get involved. And I think that long vacation would allow you to get immersed in the culture. And maybe Kurt's already done that, but I think that would go a long way in determining mentally, culturally, are you a fit to live in this foreign country? Because you're really breaking ties with everything you've known, and I think that's a big piece to it. Then looking at homes and condos for sale, that we don't even know anything about from Kurt's question. what kind of equity he's going to be taking with him. Does he have his home paid for here in the United States, and he's going to have the ability to put that all into a new home? That's a big piece to this too.
It is, and I also think about things that we just kind of take for granted here in the United States, things like property rights. You know, if you own property in the United States, you own it. Is that the case in a foreign country? Not sure that it might be the same. It might be different, but you need to know what that feels like and looks like going over there. You also have to think about the political environment. There are a lot of places that are very attractive from maybe a climate standpoint, but you may not feel as safe as you do in America. I don't think Costa Rica is necessarily one of those places, but you just don't ever know. It's a Central American country, and so there's just a difference in the environment that you're going to be living in, and I think you've got to really analyze that. Speaking of all of that, think about the bureaucracy. Is it easy? And there are people that have gone before you, so you can check that out. If you are talking to people in Portugal, or if you're talking to people in Costa Rica, if you go there and spend a large amount of time there before you actually move, then you need to not just be sitting around enjoying the environment. You need to be asking lots of questions. How is it when we do this? How is it when we do that? Will we be able to do this? What is the level of health care? I want to go back to the healthcare thing because, you know, it's very much prominent in the media, Scott, that if you're in Canada or if you're in Great Britain, it takes forever to get anything done medically, and you just don't want to be in that situation. Although there are long lines of waiting for medical procedures in the United States to some degree, you don't want to exacerbate that situation by moving abroad and doing so unbeknownst to you before you actually pull the trigger.
Yeah, and when Kurt says missing some big risk, I think the other thing that comes to my mind, John, is taxes. You know, you think about paying U.S. taxes on the money he earned here, and then if he's taking distributions from his IRA, still receiving Social Security, there's going to be U.S. taxes to pay, but there might be some foreign taxes to pay or some local taxes to pay if you are living in a foreign country, and that's something to really analyze too when you're trying to figure out where you're going to live in retirement. Do you need to learn a new language? I mean, is that something, how prevalently is English spoken in one of these countries? Again, I don't know the answer to that. And then the social networking side as well. Family and friends, you're going to be leaving them. I think it's just important not to get lost in the romanticism of living abroad without considering how isolating it could potentially be, how limiting it could potentially be on your cash flow and your overall income. So you really, I think, it goes back to analyzing why. And I'm not sure Kurt hasn't already thought about these things, but those are the big risks to me. And I do think I've had at least one client, and in fact, one client who did consider going to Costa Rica. That was part of her dream, a retirement. She lives in Oklahoma and decided that they weren't going to end up going to Costa Rica after a long vacation there. And it wasn't anything they had a problem with the country. But what they decided to do was it made more financial sense for them to continue to have their retirement and their life spent here in the U.S. and then just take long vacations there. You know, I liken this to a lot of people looking at a beach house. Mm-hmm. The romantic idea of owning a beach house. I've flirted with that myself. I really want that. That's a dream of mine. But if you really start to analyze the cost for me, it's probably going to be cheaper for me to rent a beach house for a month once a year. And if I can't go more than that, then really I'm going to get my beach fix just doing that 1 month. So maybe a long international trip might be financially feasible more than living abroad.
This will tell you everything you need to know about me. On the weekends, I read the Wall Street Journal because I don't have time during the week. But there was an article in the Wall Street Journal this weekend that I saw that talked about exactly what you're talking about, that people who bought reasonably priced condominiums in Florida now wish they hadn't because the condo fees have gone up, the insurance has gone through the roof, there's all kinds of issues, and a lot of those condos are aging, and so they're having to retrofit those condos because you remember the big condo that crashed and killed right at 100 people in South Florida about 2 or 3 years ago. Now that it's just a mess. And so, you know, to your point, know before you go. Understand what you're stepping into, and understand whether you've got anybody to talk to over there. Is there, if you don't know the language, you don't have any friends over there, if you're just kind of planting your flag and jumping in and going, oh, we're going to figure it out and make it work, maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. I would not want to sink a bunch of money into a move abroad without having all the facts in front of me.
Yeah, and I'm trying to translate that into living abroad. If you don't, we would encourage you to sit down with a financial advisor and one who does holistic planning and can create a retirement income plan for you. We do that here at GenWealth. You can reach out to us anytime, toll-free, 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You can also send us an email to show@getreadyforthefuture.com and begin that planning for your retirement. Also, a reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content you can't find anywhere else to help you discover, protect, and share true financial independence. Just search for GenWealth Financial Advisors. Our next question on the show today is from Janice via text message. We're 55 and have about $500,000 saved. Most of it is in real estate. Should we be worried about being asset rich, cash poor in retirement? Short answer is yes. Need some liquidity in retirement, lots of liquidity. Bricks and mortar look great on paper, but can you spend that in retirement? So let's talk about liquidity and lifestyle. First question here for Janice. Is the real estate your primary residence? Because she says it's primarily in real estate, or is it in some sort of income producing real estate? Because as we say on this show and in our client meeting rooms all the time, retirement is not essentially an asset problem. You do have to have them, but retirement is an income problem first and foremost, John. And that's the way I look at real estate. If you've got some income being produced from it, that's a little bit different than it being all soaked into your primary residence.
Yeah, pardon me. Absolutely. I believe that first of all, $500,000 in real estate is not going to produce a great amount of income in retirement. I think also that when you look at that $500,000, if it is producing income, let's say it's producing $30,000 a year, is that $30,000 a year amount a gross amount that it's producing, or is that net after taxes, maintenance, upkeep, all of the things that are necessary to keep a income producing property continuing to produce income? Because that's where the rubber really meets the road. How much spendable money would you walk away with that real estate? So I think your point is spot on, Scott, because clearly you've got to be able to utilize this asset to its biggest advantage. You don't know about the ability to grow the income from that asset. Let's say it's producing $30,000 a year. If it's producing $30,000 a year, will it continue to produce, pardon me, will it continue to produce $30,000 a year, or will you be able to increase the rent on that piece of property? Yeah. All of those things are very much in play here, Scott, and you might want to think about this being a little bit more liquid, because if you needed to invade the principal, you can't go saw off part of the house or part of the building and go sell part of it to create more capital.
So, Janice, let's get a little more granular about that $500,000. We've already kind of asked you where it is. When you and your spouse will retire, though, the first step is to assess income needs and wants, and then develop a retirement income plan that provides for it. So we want to first determine your required income amount. This is the amount needed to pay your monthly expenses and have a basic lifestyle. So this is not the trip to Costa Rica, right? This is just your basic lifestyle, paying the monthly expenses, your utilities, your clothing, any insurance cost, any debt service that has to be made, and then some marginal lifestyle that can be met with your required income. So we want to find that number, that monthly number, and then match it to your guaranteed income sources. What are you going to get from Social Security? And of course, that depends on your Social Security claiming strategy, and we can help you with that. Is there a pension? What guaranteed income do you have to meet those guaranteed income expenses, right? Rental income, if there's a piece to that in this, and for anybody else listening, can be considered guaranteed income, but it is not quite as guaranteed as Social Security and pension for the same reasons John's already talked about. If you have a long-term lease, that's great, but what happens if that renter leaves? And then, of course, the maintenance that eats into that, it's a little harder to project than Social Security or a pension.
Scott, my concern also would be whether or not this is diversified. With $500,000, I would think, just with prices of any kind of real estate these days, I would think that there's very little diversification in the assets that they have. And so if somebody moves out, then what? What happens until you can fill that vacancy? That can be a real problem, and that turns that quote-unquote guaranteed income stream into a non-guaranteed income stream, because you'd have to fill it in some other way, or it has to be discretionary spending. So those things are all things that you want to think about. I think also the other thing that I would mention is that anytime you limit your cash, you limit your flexibility.
Yeah.
You limit the situations that you can deal with. And when you have money tied up in what is essentially an illiquid asset, because it is sometimes hard to move real estate. People have had to sit on properties for a long period of time before the right buyer came along. And so when you have a limited amount of cash, then you have limited options when life comes at you.
Yeah. And we have clients who have come to us with similar questions, been in a similar situation potentially. And in most cases, they've had rental real estate portfolio and have created a plan to divest themselves of some or all of it over time. And if you're 55 here and you're not planning to retire anytime soon, Janice, you've got time to develop a plan to do that, considering taxation in that, considering what you need to do to pay off debt if there is some of that. We have done this before with clients, and if you're someone out there listening that is in a situation where, hey, I've got all this rental property, and man, it's a great business, but I'm getting older, right? And I don't really want to pay somebody to maintain it, and really need a plan to provide myself income more passively. That might be an option for you to sit down and create a plan to divest yourself of your real estate portfolio, again, some or all of it, to build assets and position them differently to provide yourself income in retirement. The other piece of that, John, too, is it's not basically sell the house and go right into stocks. There are opportunities like a 1031 exchange to be able to move real estate to real estate to defer the taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a tax situation that's going to trigger a capital gain, depending on what type of real estate it is, then you've got to deal with that one way or the other. But I think that this does require sitting down with a financial advisor and maybe a CPA to talk through your options. But I think to have all of your eggs in one basket is a bad situation going into a vulnerable state of affairs like retirement. If you don't have the ability to go out and get a job to replace lost income, then the income sources that you have got to be stable. They've got to be guaranteed. You've got to have a situation where you have liquidity. There's a lot more to it than just buying something that's producing what looks to be pretty good income right now and then figuring out later it's not so great.
Yeah, the bottom line here as we wrap this one up, and I hope everyone's listening when I say this, net worth is not as important as income in retirement.
Wow.
Two different things.
That's incredibly powerful, Scott. That if anybody misses that point, they're going to miss the whole idea of what it means to be financially independent.
We are going to name this our question of the week. So congratulations to Janice for that, for sending that in. We're going to send you a free Get Ready for the Future show tumbler. We just need you to send us an email to claim it, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Next up, it is Ellie from Fayetteville. I'm 49, recently remarried, and my new spouse has very little retirement savings. I've got about $400,000 saved on my own. How do we build a financial plan that protects both of us fairly? Great question, Ellie. Blending finances in a second marriage isn't just about the numbers. It's about protecting your future without risking theirs. And I have some personal experience with this.
Yes.
We've been blending a family for the last 3 years, And it is a little bit of a process, to say the least, to determine even how you're going to pay the bills. Whose checking account does it come out of? That is a process that has to be worked through. It comes with a lot of emotion, a lot of, and if there's kids involved, a lot of other considerations there as well. So I don't envy you, Ellie. I'm working through it myself, and we're 3 years in and still kind of tweaking the process along the way. But I do think when it comes to retirement, you do have to, on some level, get on the same page as being in this together. Now, I know that's hard. When you come to the table with $400,000 saved and your spouse has very little, so we're going to say negligible retirement savings, it is very difficult to think about things as us versus me and or mine and hers, or mine and his in this case. But I think to some degree, if you are living under the same roof, you're going to have to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I think that this is a great opportunity to really allow your new spouse to turn his attention to saving for retirement. I don't know why he has not done so in the past, but now there are two incomes in the family, and I think you could basically say, okay, we've got to get you caught up. We've got to get you moving toward where I already am. That doesn't mean you stop and wait on him. You keep saving and growing. But that's the beauty of IRA accounts or 401k accounts. Those are individual retirement accounts. Now, what happens if down the road you get divorced? That's all really up in the air, and it all depends on the negotiations between the parties and what the judge says. But we're not going to go there. We're not going to, try to talk negative about what your future might be. But that is a consideration. But I think in the positive vein, what you want to do is you want to encourage your spouse to save as much as possible, because he's behind. And here's the real truth. You have $400,000. $400,000 is not going to sustain your retirement, much less yours and his. Mm-hmm. And so you both have to be really at this. But there are some provisions that, based on their age, they're not too far from being able to supercharge their contributions.
Yeah, and I think the first thing I would say, Ellie, is are you in agreement about what you want retirement to look like together? One of the protection pieces of this, you were talking about protection. Where are you on life insurance? I think that's important too, because obviously you're a little bit more prepared to have assets if something happened to you, pay off anything you needed to pay off, pass on to you. But if something happens to your spouse, obviously they don't have the assets to pass to you. So where are you on life insurance? A review on that. Beneficiaries, if you are recently remarried, have you updated those? If your spouse needs to be included on that, if there's a trust, if there's a new trust, new estate planning, all that needs to be reviewed. But to John's point, a good thing for you at 49, and you're telling us you're 49. We don't know how old your spouse is. But in either case, if it is just you, you've got some time to make changes to contributions to catch up or make up some ground, whoever's employer plan it happens in, because catch-up contributions are available to you in the year you turn 50. So if you're turning 50 in 2025, there's going to be more opportunity for you to get more into your employer plan. And the question, too, does your spouse have access to a workplace retirement plan? Because if not, it doesn't mean they can't have a retirement account. Because if you file a joint tax return, Ellie can actually contribute to an IRA in the spouse's name. So whether it's a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, and we need to know about income limits there, because if you make over a certain amount, you're ineligible to contribute to a Roth IRA. Otherwise, a Roth IRA would be a great option here. In other words, your spouse can own a Roth IRA even if they don't work, but if you file a joint return. So you can get two Roth IRAs potentially going here. There's a lot of opportunities to get money into retirement accounts, even if the new spouse has very little saved. And we're going to assume that it's because he hasn't maybe had access to it.
That's a possibility. But let me kind of reset the stage here for Ellie and her new spouse. This is a great time for you guys to do some joint planning. You've got to get on the same page as far as, what your future is going to look like. So sitting down with a financial advisor and getting a real clear picture of what retirement needs are and what your desires are. You've got to cover the needs first, and that's where I would start. You've got $400,000. That's a good starting spot. Now, what do we do to move forward in a way that's going to be effective? The only way that you can do that is to go through the financial planning process with someone who is adept at retirement income planning. That's not just going to throw some stuff up against the wall and see if it sticks, but literally is going to sit down with you and help you to understand, okay, these are the contributions that need to be made. Can I take advantage of a workplace retirement match program? All of the things. You really need to be firing with all of the cylinders on this as much as possible as you drive toward retirement. And that financial planning process is something that a gifted advisor can work with you on to try to get you a very clear picture. And then once you've got the clear picture, it's down to the execution. It's down to just saving the money, being committed to the goals that you both sit down together and work out. And Scott, I think that's just the best thing for them to do, is determine how much more that they can save and really just get after it at this point. Because as I said, $400,000 isn't going to really secure Ellie for retirement. Much less both of them. They really got to start really getting on this.
And you know what I like about both of these last two questions is the ages.
Yep.
49 and Janice was 55. They're asking questions with still a lot of time to do something about it. And so I just want to encourage anybody listening or watching the show that if you're kind of in that age group and you've kind of got a pretty good nest egg going, $500,000, $400,000, whatever that might be, but you wonder if it's enough, and you've got time to change things and change the trajectory of what your future retirement is going to look like. But now is the time to act. As John said, get with an advisor who's going to build a plan so that you know where you're headed on your path to true financial independence. We'd love to do that for you here at GenWealth Financial Advisors. You can call us toll-free, 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526 to see where you are right now and where you're going, build that plan, and get you to financial independence. Time for our final question on today's show. It's George from Bryant. My wife wants to retire at 60. I'd prefer to work until 68. Can we plan for two timelines, or are we asking for trouble? When retirement dates don't match, neither do the risks. Now, here's how to plan when one of you is ready and one of you is not. And it happens all the time. I'd say it's more common for people to retire at the same time. Now, we don't really know how old you are now, George says. My wife wants to retire at 60. I'd prefer to work until 68. And I'm not real sure if he's saying that his wife wants him to retire at age 60. So we're going to have to make some assumptions here, but it does happen all the time. First question, how much time between are we talking about? How close to 60 is your wife, and how close to 68 are you? In other words, how much time is there available to bridge the gap between the first spouse who retires and the second spouse to retire? Because that's really, for me, John, I think the critical piece here is, what does the employed spouse do to be able to defer taking any money from their assets?
Yeah, and I'm just going to back up because George asked a very critical question at the tail end of his question. Are we asking for trouble? Yeah. Here is where you're asking for trouble, George. When you have to get up and go to work and your spouse is still asleep in the bed, are you going to be okay with that? That's the question, okay? Because that's reality. I've had clients come in and be at odds with each other because one retired and one didn't, and they're really not very happy that they're having to go and grab the lunch pail and get out the door while the other is sitting there, I don't know, drinking their morning coffee or whatever the case may be. So I think that the first of all, the personality, psychological part of this is something that you guys have got to get comfortable with. If you are like most guys and are okay going to work and don't really care one way or the other what's happening with your spouse, then this will be just fine. But if both of you are contributing income to the family and that one income stops, I guess the first question would be, does she have resources that could help to replace that income? or are you making enough money to carry the mail for the rest of the family or for the rest of the household? And so I think those are some things that I would work through there. But your question about how much time and all of that, I think that is very mechanical in terms of how you plan for this, but it can be planned for. It definitely can be planned for. Software that we have can do amazing things. I don't know that you can create a scenario that you can't map out in the software that we have access to. But I think that this could be advantageous. One spouse still working while could keep the other spouse from withdrawing any from their retirement income. If that can work out fine, then we should be in good shape. But if you have to draw down, here's where this runs into a problem. You have one spouse that starts drawing at age 60. The other is not going to start drawing until age 68. You could have this imbalance happen where the wife's assets are getting drawn down, and then all of a sudden you are having to depend on the assets of the non-retired spouse to fill in that gap. So a lot of questions here, a lot of things that I think are very, very concerning. But a big concern that hasn't been talked about in any of this is healthcare.
Yeah, I think that's another piece to this on the health insurance side of things. If you continue to work, can you cover her on your insurance until Medicare eligibility at age 65? You know, there is a reason that 65 is the most popular age for people to retire in this country. It's because that's when Medicare kicks in. And usually there's not a solid plan, or at least not a cost-effective plan, to get someone to age 65 if they retire from their work health insurance beforehand. So if your wife, George, retires at age 60, how are you going to get her to age 65? You working until 68 might be a great way to do that if you can carry her on your insurance. It also allows for one spouse to defer Social Security. There's a big benefit in that because the larger benefit will be the one that remains after you pass. You know, people don't often understand that when they first come into our client meeting room. They often don't. There are two Social Security checks in the family. When one person dies, obviously both of them don't keep going, but the larger one does. So if the person who survives has a smaller benefit, they actually will take over for the one who had the larger benefit. So for a couple to defer one of their checks to a later point in time to get it to be bigger can be an advantage down the line. Now, John's already kind of alluded to one of the downsides here. He talked about just maybe the envious mentality of having to go to work while you're leaving the other spouse behind who's retired. But there is a time spend issue here too. If you've got big plans for your retirement, if you want to travel in retirement, you're going to have to both be retired more than likely to do much of that. You know, my spouse is about 6 or 7 years younger, between 6 and 7. I know how much younger she is. That sounded a little vague. It's between 6 and 7 years younger than me, and that's one of the things we've talked about. You know, she really probably is not going to be ready to retire when I am.
Right.
But we're going to want to travel together. So how do we do that with one spouse working and the other spouse at home? You don't want to get too far down the line, George, too far back past 68, and your health doesn't allow you to do the things that you want.
Yeah, retirement has to be looked at both individually but as a couple. And what are the things that you want to do as a couple? Are those things that you're going to still have the flexibility to do? If George has a flexible job and he has plenty of time off, then yeah, maybe that can work out. But if it's real restrictive, then that could be an issue that they have to deal with in addition to the money issue.
Perfect. It's like you do this before.
I have done it a time or two.
Walked right up to that bell for our final thoughts. That means we're inside of our last couple of minutes here on the show. And what's your big takeaway this week, John?
Scott, there's a lot of details here. There's a lot of, very fine tuning that has to do in almost all of these cases. And that's what we do here at GenWealth is we fine tune retirement all the time. We are all in the details with clients inside our software and helping people to plan and then executing on those plans by the investments that we make. I want to caution folks because there is a trend these days, it seems like, to try to find the easy button for retirement. There's a big movement of people saying, hey, cash out your 401k, put all your money in this life insurance policy, and then borrow the money out tax-free. Well, that's like, I don't know, getting medical advice from a bubblegum machine or something. I have no idea. That has no relevance in terms of facts whatsoever. Retirement is not something that is a cookie cutter, easy button deal. It is detailed. You want a detailed retirement plan. You want something that works for you, and the pleasure is frankly in the details as opposed to the devil being in the details of financial planning. And I think we see that in our questions today.
Yeah, I think about some of the questions we're thinking about. Should we be worried about? How do we build? Can we plan for this or asking for trouble? You know, these questions need answers, and the answers come through the planning process. If you'd like to step into that at GenWealth, walk through the GenWealth Ready to Retire process with us by calling toll-free 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. And that's all the time we have for this week's show. Thanks for people who dropped in the questions for us this week. We want to encourage you to do the same thing. 501-381-5228. You can send in a text or leave a voicemail at that number, 501-381-5228. See you next time.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.